Now, I hate to break it to you, but there's no such thing as a baby carrot. The cute little carrots they sell at supermarkets are actually regular carrots that have been shaved down to this baby size. You would think strawberry-flavored gummy bears should be red or pink, right? Well, sorry to say, but they're green. Brown rice and white rice are the same product. The white variety starts off as the brown one, but then some parts of it are removed by milling, which gives the rice its white color. This allows it to be stored for longer, but at the same time reduces the rice's nutritional value. Now, on the topic of rice, it was used to build the Great Wall of China. The builders mixed sticky rice soup with lime and got rice mortar for construction. It was stronger and had better water resistance than regular lime mortar. Thanks to the rice soup, the Great Wall has been able to stand for centuries despite the elements. You found a long-forgotten chocolate bar somewhere deep in your desk. Yum! Nice surprise! But when you open it, you hesitate. There's some unpleasant-looking kind of dusty film on it. Don't worry though, it's still safe to eat. It's just that the fat or cocoa butter used to make the chocolate has been separated from the rest of the bar because of the heat. As it cooled back down, it created this whitish film. The taste might be a little off, however, so it may be best to use it for cooking instead. And you'd have more self-control than I do. Avocados can't ripen while on the tree. If not picked, they will simply fall from the branch while still not ripe. When picked, though, they will become soft and flavorful just like we love them. This happens because of the burst of ethylene produced by the fruit itself after picking. It's inhibited while the avocado is still on the tree. Tomatoes bought at supermarkets often have a weak flavor. It has to do with how they're grown and stored afterwards. Tomatoes are gathered when not fully ripe yet, and they ripen in the transportation containers and on the store shelves. But if they're stored at temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit while not fully ripe, they lose a lot of their flavor. So, to keep them tasty, it's best to store tomatoes outside the fridge. Honey is probably the only food that can literally never go bad. If it's properly sealed with no air left in, it can go for millennia and still be edible. The oldest pot of honey ever found was 5,500 years old, next to the mummy of Winnie the Pooh. Nah, not really. While dark and milk chocolate raise no questions, their white sibling isn't chocolate at all. It doesn't contain any cocoa powder, which makes chocolate, well, chocolate. The white variety is made of cocoa butter mixed with sugar and flavoring, usually vanilla. Peanuts are closer relatives to peas than to nuts. They're legumes, the type of plants that includes peas, chickpeas, and beans. Cashew nuts aren't nuts either. They're seeds that are collected from pretty large fruits. The same can be said about walnuts, almonds, pecans, and pistachios. When you buy some sushi rolls with crab meat, what you get is no crab at all. The red and white stuff is what is called imitation crab, and it's basically paste made of fish. Its other name is surimi. By the way, sushi was originally a way to preserve fish. It was stored in fermented rice, which could keep fish fresh for up to a year. And after that, the rice was thrown away while the fish was cooked and eaten. If you get all tearful while cutting onions, there are several ways to avoid that. One is put the onion in the freezer before cutting it. That will freeze the molecules of the chemical that makes you cry. Another method is washing the onion in cool water just before cutting it. The cold and moisture left on the onion will not allow the tearful chemical to get in your eyes. And the third way is to put a wet paper towel next to your cutting board. The chemical gets attracted to the nearest water source, which is usually your eyes, but in this case, it'll be the towel. Now, the vast majority of wasabi we eat isn't actual wasabi. The real thing is very expensive. So what we get is just a mixture of horseradish, mustard, and green food coloring. Be careful when you eat fresh pineapple because it can literally eat you back. It contains an enzyme that digests protein. That burning sensation you get when you've eaten a bit too much pineapple, that's it. Mac and cheese used to be a really fancy dish back in the 18th century US. Pasta could only be imported from Italy, which made it expensive, and the process of making cheese was time and effort consuming. It didn't make the product cheaper either. Only the wealthiest could afford a plate of mac and cheese, and it was served in the fanciest restaurants as a delicacy. Oysters, lobsters, and pretty much any other seafood, on the other hand, were considered food for the poor back in the day. Seaside communities fed themselves with what they could catch in the sea, and that included mussels, crabs, and a lot of other stuff we consider delicacies today. Wow, I think if I ate mac and cheese with lobster right now, my head would explode. Back to rich food. In medieval times, fish was considered a gift fit for a king. English monarchs were known to be presented with huge pikes, and even before that, in the Roman Empire, fish such as red mullet was a delicacy that emperors paid for with large amounts of gold. Farmed salmon fresh is naturally gray. Wild fish eat a lot of shrimp, which makes their meat that trademark pink-orange color. The farm kind is fed with a special plant pigment for the same effect. The inventor of petroleum jelly, Sir Robert Cheesebrough, claimed to eat a spoonful of Vaseline every single day. He also asked his nurse to cover him head to toe in the stuff when he fell seriously ill. He soon recovered and lived to be 96 years of age. All the while, he firmly believed in petroleum jelly's miraculous properties. It was a slick product. Oranges actually gave their name to the color we now know as orange. In Old English, this color was called roughly yellow-red. Only when the fruit became widespread across Europe, the word that signified their color appeared. If you want to take a closer look at a beehive, make sure you don't have any bananas on you. The pheromone that alarms bees to rise and protect their home smells like bananas, so you're likely to become their enemy number one if you get too close. Milk was once proved as a material for plastic. It was biodegradable and non-soluble in water and virtually didn't burn. But it was later outperformed by oil-based plastic because the milk-based variety couldn't be molded and became brittle over time. Also, the oil-based kind was a lot cheaper in production. Pound cake got its name for the mass of its ingredients. It was originally made from a pound of butter, a pound of eggs, and, you guessed it, a pound of sugar.
Sandwich bread is not entirely real bread. Water can boil and freeze at the same time. Bananas are berries that grow in grass. Believe these or not, but let me ask you, did you know water can be wetter than it is in nature? Find out in this video. Bubblegum is usually pink because the first commercial gum, made in 1928, was like that. Pink simply was the only color of the food dye available at the factory. The first chewing gum ever, though, probably appeared about 9,000 years back. People chewed birch bark tar back then for its medicinal properties, for example, to fight fever. In fact, at different periods, people used to chew on lots of stuff. For instance, the ancient Mayans made gum out of chicle, a substance made from the sapodilla tree sap. They used it to fight hunger and quench thirst. And in North America, people chewed spruce tree resin, a habit which European settlers later picked up and turned into a commercial thing in the 1840s. You can't name a folder CON on any version of Windows. This also applies to some other letter combinations, such as PRN, AUX, NUL, and others. It has to do with the operating system itself. It creates folders to store data in them. And if you create one of your own using one of these names, it will confuse the system. If you shuffle a deck of cards to get every possible combination, you'll spend billions upon billions upon billions of years just to get a third of the way there. Think about it. There are 52 cards in a regular deck. And the possible number of combinations without repeating is 8 times 10 raised to the power of 67. Even if you shuffled the cards 100 times per second without repeating combinations, it will take you several hundreds of trillions of the times the universe has existed so far. Folding a simple sheet of paper 103 times will get you a stack 93 billion light years thick, which is more than the size of the observable universe. But if you decide to check this on your own, you won't be able to fold it more than 12 times. And that would require a really big sheet of paper too, as in almost a mile long. With a regular printing paper sheet, it would be even less, 7 times. In many supermarkets, you'll see 2 different bread sections, bread and bakery, and they do have different types of bread in them. The lighter, square, and most often cut in advance variety is called white pan bread, or sandwich bread, while the other is, well, just bread. The difference is that sandwich bread is made specifically to have stuff spread on it. It has a tougher texture, which allows the slice to not fall apart and go all crumbly when you put, say, peanut butter on it. It's also soft enough, letting you bite into your sandwich and not squeeze the contents out of the sides, turning your meal into a mighty mess. Finally, white pan bread lasts longer than regular bread because of the additives in it. They preserve the bread's texture for a week or so in your home, allowing you to enjoy your PB&Js for longer, while the traditional bread variety would likely go stale the next day. There's a state at which water can both be boiling and freezing. It's called a triple point, and it occurs when all three states of a substance, liquid, solid, and vapor, exist at all the same time without messing with each other. For water, the triple point happens just a tiny bit over the freezing temperature and at an atmospheric pressure of 0.006 atmospheres. The blue bird you see on the Twitter logo has an official name. It's Larry the Bird. And the creator of the social network named it after the former NBA basketball player Larry Bird from the Boston Celtics. If you've decided to save a few bucks by charging your smartphone less often, let me disappoint you. To charge a cell phone, you use teeny amounts of electricity. That's why the maximum amount of money you can save within a year is less than $1. Jeep is actually an abbreviation. Originally, it was called a GP, or a general purpose vehicle. It was only much later that it became a brand we know today. Bananas have a curved shape because they turn towards the sun. They're also not trees, but grass, by the way. The bunches grow downwards. But the fruit itself wants to get towards the sun, so it curves a bit up while it grows. Spandex, a fiber used for making sports clothing, got its name as an anagram of the word expands. If you were to watch every video on YouTube, you'd have to spend 1,000 years on that, and then about 1,000 times more because of all the new videos that would appear by then. You probably know that tomatoes are technically berries. Well, bananas, peppers, watermelons, and eggplants are too. There's a little open jar symbol on every cosmetics item packaging. It's called PAO, period after opening, and it tells you how long you can safely use the product after opening it. The jar is usually accompanied by a number with the letter M, which stands for months. Just make sure you remember exactly when you open the package so that you'll know when 3, 6, 9, or however many months indicated have passed. A phone jack often has several rings on it, each representing different components. One ring is for mono sound, 2 are for stereo, and the third one means your earphones have a microphone function built in. To know if an egg you boiled is fully cooked, just spin it on the countertop. If the egg spins steadily without immediately falling over, it's done. Instead of using good old water, firefighters extinguish fires with wet water. They add special wetting agents to it, chemicals that reduce the surface tension that regular water has. It helps the substance to soak into objects and spread everywhere much more easily. Your shower curtain sometimes gets a bit too clingy when you get into the shower trying to get clean. According to the shower curtain effect, the hot water lowers the air pressure behind the curtain. The higher, denser pressure outside the shower pushes the curtain in, making you feel like your shower curtain is out to get you. If you take a closer look at the regular garbage bag, you'll probably notice that the seam is inside out. In fact, you're not supposed to shake up the bag to open it. You gotta place the bag over a garbage can like a hat, and then just push the middle of the bag down into the can. This way, the seam will end up where it should be, inside. There's a tricky anti-rodent disc to make sure no rat is aboard. Rats usually get on a boat via mooring chains, so this disc fits onto them, and no rodent can go on a voyage. Jewelry is often sold in small pouches. They actually have a hidden purpose. They help prevent tarnish. Most retailers assure that the ring or whatsoever was sold is safe and secure. In most supermarkets, oranges usually come in mesh bags. Well, those bags don't really have any hidden purpose, but you can turn it into a great scrubbing tool. Just tie it up and see how it works next time you have an extra greasy frying pan. You don't need to scoop the jam out of a double yogurt container section. This type of plastic is quite flexible, so you just need to fold it in half and pour the jam directly into the yogurt section. The hidden function of a cup plunger is actually that it was meant to be used for sinks. Yeah, it works for toilets too, but you can keep an extra one to unclog the sink in case you need it. An extra hole at the upper part of the sink has multiple hidden functions. First, in case someone forgets to close the tap, the water won't overflow, and the bathroom won't get flooded. Second, thanks to that hole, the water drains faster, as it gives an escape for the air, helping the water flow down. Most metallic zippers have a hidden lock inside them to save them from awkward situations, such as an undone fly. Don't leave the zipper handle in an upward position. When you pull it downwards, it automatically locks. It's all thanks to those tiny grooves hidden underneath the handle. Bath foam isn't only for fun or a nice smell. It also helps regulate the temperature. The bubbles keep the water hot, so you can enjoy a bath a bit longer. Anyway, it works for acrylic bathtubs only. Those made of metal lose heat really fast either way. Escalator brushes aren't for keeping your shoes clean and polished. It might be tough to apply wax right on that brush while the escalator's moving. It's for our safety. Brushes won't let you come close to the edge, so a long coat or bootcut jeans won't end up in between the steps. Originally, golf balls were smooth. They have a dimpled surface now because players noticed that overused balls with damages flew better than brand new ones. At some point, manufacturers started producing balls with dimples. If you take a box of aluminum foil, you'll see tabs you can press on the side. They keep the foil straight and prevent it from rolling. It's also easier to tear off some amount of foil thanks to those tabs. Jerry cans have 3 handles for a reason. It's a smart designer move, so when you carry it alone, you use only the central handle to distribute the weight evenly. But your friend wants to help you out. Each of you grabs the side handle. 2 flat prongs you can see on standard plugs used in North and Central America make sense. But how about those holes near the tips? Thanks to them, the outlet firmly grips the plug so that it won't loosen or fall out of the socket. It's sometimes irritating when you haven't used the entire stick of deodorant. There's a little bit more left, but it's hard to reach it. Okay, the trick is easy. Unscrew the bottom, take a pencil, and force it underneath that moving platform. That way, you'll push what's left of the deodorant out. There's a number put on the side of many cosmetic products. It isn't picked randomly. It tells you how long your product will last after you've opened it. This is why it has an open jar for a graphic symbol. A lint roller is good at removing those tiny fibers, but you can also use it to clean other stuff. For example, when you want to remove the dirt from the utensil tray in your dishwasher, simply take your sticky lint roller and put it into each compartment, and all the crumbs, dirt, and leftovers are all gone. Kings depicted on playing cards are real historical characters. Spades, King David. Clubs, Alexander the Great. Hearts, Charles the Great. Diamonds, Julius Caesar. Rings used to be more than a stylish accessory. The nobility used rings as a seal. Archers wore rings to protect their fingers from bowstring injuries, while needlewomen from needle pricks. Detachable headrests in cars are all about safety. If you pull it out of a seat, you'll see 2 pretty sturdy bars. If you ever get locked or trapped in a car, you can get out of there smashing the window with these bars. A little arrow next to the refueling indicator on the car's dashboard indicates which side of the vehicle has fuel tank openings. It's useful when you need to refuel a rented car. You are probably using shampoo wrong all the time. Well, the main thing you should know is that you don't apply it directly on your hair. You gotta apply it onto the roots only. The foam that you make is enough to clean your hair. A button on the reverse side of a shirt collar is needed to hold a tie in place. Anyway, this button was designed for slim ties that are not that popular today, so this button is only an element of design. A cotton pads pack has those strings on it to hang it on some hook or holder. There's no need to untighten and tighten the pack again. Look at the bottom, it has a perforated line. Tear along it and just pull out a cotton pad from a hanging pack. It's a myth that the red side of the eraser is for pencil and the blue one is for ink. The blue gets rid of mistakes on thicker types of paper only. It works both for pencil and even ink. But make sure the paper is really thick. But that blue little thing can do so much more. It can polish your jewelry, clean your electronics, For example, the screen of your cell phone. You know those irritating sticker residues that won't peel off? Eraser helps there too. Same as with cleaning scuffed up suede or dirt you have on your walls.
Although it's tall and massive, the Statue of Liberty doesn't always stand still. When the wind is strong enough, she sways by around 3 inches, and her torch about twice as much. And then on calm days, if you look closely at her feet, you can sometimes catch her doing a little jig underneath that flowing robe. Not really. You know, there is more than one Statue of Liberty. A bronze replica of its little sister that served as a model for the New York statue stands in the Jardin du Luxembourg in Paris. Yeah, I never took French in school, but I try. A quarter-size replica of the iconic monument is on an island in the Seine River, also in Paris. There is also a life-size gold leaf-colored copy of the torch on entrance to a world-famous tunnel in Paris. I'm not even going to try to say that name. Back in New York, if you look very closely at the face of Lady Liberty, you can clearly see that the famous statue was inspired by none other than the 50s pop star Elvis Presley. Nah, I'm just messing with you. The Statue of Liberty was designed by Frederick August Bartholdi 60 years before Elvis was even born. People have different opinions about who really inspired the face of Lady Liberty. According to one theory, the model for her was the beautiful Isabella Boyer. Isabella was born in 1841 to a wealthy family in Paris. When she turned 22, she moved to New York to marry an American entrepreneur and became a socialite. The real unglamorous story is Bartholdi modeled the face after his mother, who, I guess, Elvis looked like. Now, another theory suggests that Lady Liberty might not be modeled after a Western white woman as previously thought. As a young man, Bartholdi went on a trip to Egypt, and after seeing the pyramids, he was inspired to create colossal sculptures. Older and more successful, Bartholdi returned to Egypt to propose a new sculpture at the entrance of the Suez Canal. The sculpture was to be called Egypt Carrying the Light to Asia, and depicted a cloaked figure holding a torch to guide travelers through the canal. Well, that one cost too much, but he kept the idea in his head until another opportunity arose in New York Harbor. This is what the statue looked like 135 years ago. Yeah, its color is very different. It's the same color you'd see if you cut through an electrical wire, because the entire outside of the statue is made of copper. About 20 years after it was installed, it turned completely green. That's because the air and the frequent rains gradually oxidize the metal into a coating called patina. And that metal is extremely thin. Designers could have made those sheets of metal thicker, but then the statue would have been even heavier and it would have fallen under its own weight. A little thinner, and the severe oxidation and corrosion of the metal would have made holes in the statue. The sculptor had thought well about the construction of the statue, and it took more than 10 years to build it. But it all started with this model, made of clay. It was only 4 feet tall. So you would probably be taller than this mini Statue of Liberty, even with its arm raised. The next model was made of plaster. By increasing the size, the sculptor could add and refine the details of the statue. For example, a detail that you would never be able to see from Liberty Island or even from the pedestal. It's the shackles by her ankles. It looks as if she has thrown them off, symbolizing freedom. The next model was 33 feet tall, or the length of a school bus. That's about a quarter of the statue's actual size, and it was the maximum size the sculptor could fit in his workshop. Then the sculptor proceeded to create the full-size pieces, the head and the hand holding the torch. The other hand held a stone tablet with Roman numerals embossed on it, signifying July 4, 1776, the date of American independence. So, it was time to build the final version of the Statue of Liberty. The constructors needed all the parts of the statue made of plaster first. Here's its head. They took sheets of wood parallel to each other and pushed them against the model. The edges of the sheets then were shaped so that they perfectly replicated the shapes and curves of the statue. In other words, it was a mold. Then, the wooden structure was placed on the floor and covered with a sheet of copper the thickness of a penny. All that was left was to carefully shape the sheet of copper into the curves of the statue with soft wooden mallets and a press. The statue and pedestal together cost $500,000 to build. French supporters raised funds to build the statue, and Americans paid for the pedestal it would stand on. In today's money, that would be over $10 million. The statue was completed in France and then shipped to America, packed in hundreds of wooden crates. Over 200,000 Americans waited to greet the ship carrying Lady Liberty as it arrived in New York Harbor. The statue was assembled in 4 months on Bedloes Island, which is now known as Liberty Island. Now, a mistake might have been made when the Statue of Liberty was assembled. During an inspection in 1982, workers realized that her head had been installed 2 feet off-center. Yeah, sometimes I feel like that too. Shortly down the road, in front of this famous Paris tunnel, is the Flame of Liberty. This is a full-size replica of the flame from Lady Liberty's torch covered in gold leaf. This monument was gifted to France in 1989 from donors across the world as a thank you for the Statue of Liberty and as a symbol of the Franco-American friendship. About 4.5 million people visit the famous statue every year. By comparison, around 3.25 million people visit the London Eye each year. This makes the Statue of Liberty one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world. Almost 100 years after the statue was erected, Lady Liberty's torch was given a makeover. In 1984, the statue's original copper and glass torch was replaced with a new one covered in 24-karat gold leaf. The torch is the only place not accessible to visitors due to damage it previously sustained, making it unsafe to climb up there. The Statue of Liberty is 150 feet tall. That's like 10 giraffes sitting on each other's necks. Compared to the size of a person, you'd have to stand on the shoulders of your 25 friends to reach the torch in its right hand. The concrete base and pedestal make the statue even taller, 305 feet from the ground to the very top. So, let's get inside the thing. We have to go through the doors of a star-shaped base. Then you have a choice. Take the elevator up to the observation deck or go up the 192 steps. You go first. There are stairs for tourists to go up and another staircase to go down to avoid the crowds and traffic. The stairs take you to the height of a 6-story building, right up to the observation deck at the top of the pedestal. To get to the crown of the statue, we need to go to the 7th floor, where we see a double helix stairway. It runs right inside the iron pylons, the spine of the Statue of Liberty, designed by none other than Gustav Eiffel, the Eiffel Tower guy. And this stairway is double because there's one side for going up and the other for going down. And there's also some space where you can rest if you get tired while going up. Yeah, I've done it, and yes, you need it. And you need reservations. As you climb the statue, you can see exactly how the 300 copper sheets were attached to the metal frame. The story of how exactly they did that is riveting. And you can also distinguish specific details of the statue, like the folds of the dress and even locks of hair. 354 steps done. Congratulations! You've reached the observation deck in the crown of the Statue of Liberty. It's pretty cozy up there and only fits a couple of people. You can peer out over New York Harbor through 25 glass windows. They symbolize the gems of our planet. And there are powerful lanterns behind you that light up the glass. They turn on at night so that passing ships can see the statue's crown glow. Entry to the torch is not allowed for tourists. But hey, just for you, we'll open it up for a minute.
Time you receive a package in your mail, take a look at your box cutter. If it features some diagonal lines on the blade, you're in for a little design perk. Turns out that these are blades that snap off. Continuously cutting cardboard can dull the sharp edge of the blade. To help prevent the need to buy a brand new box cutter, the top segment along the next line can be broken off to reach a new sharp edge. To do this, check out the small hole at the base of the tool, sometimes called the blade snapper. The people that first came up with this brilliant invention were engineers inspired by the way chocolate bars are segmented. Hold on a minute, don't throw away the cardboard package just yet. Most likely, you'll have some silica gel packets somewhere at the bottom of the box. Since this gel is basically a drawing tool, it gathers up the moisture out of its environment, so you can store these packets for further occasions. Whether you'll need to dry out your phone or some other electrical object, you can place them in a container next to the silica gel to reduce the damage. You don't have to be a mechanic to know when a standard car tire needs replacing, since they come equipped with a neat indicator. Take a closer look, and you'll see that treads within the tire are a bunch of rubber notches. When the treads are evened out with the perpendicular bars, it's a sign you need to book an appointment with your local car service, since most likely the tires have lost most of their traction and may not be safe for driving any longer. The upper corners of a car windshield feature textured black dots melted into the glass edges. This neat add-on isn't there for design purposes. It's called frit glazing, which means that a special type of ceramic paint is added to the window for protecting its sealant from UV rays. It also conceals and creates a coarser surface for the adhesive used to set the window in place. Whenever you're up for a drive, check out if there's a small tab under your car's rearview mirror. Bet you didn't know it's there to help switch the mirror from daytime to nighttime views. It uses a prismatic glass technology to blur the reflection and reduce the glare of headlights behind you in traffic. People came up with these manually tilted mirrors in the 1930s, but they became standard somewhere in the 1970s. While you're in the car, check out the headrests, as you most likely don't know that they carry a little disguised purpose. Of course, they're adjustable to accommodate passengers of any height so that they get the proper support for their heads and necks. The hidden feature is that they are detachable and come with two very solid metal bars. Should you ever find yourself stuck in a car and need to make a fast getaway, these bars come in handy to crack out the car windows. So you're out for a drive and you're suddenly out of gas. What I'm about to describe sounds more like a meme than an actual situation bound to happen. But what if you're in such a hurry that you accidentally drive off with the gas nozzle still in the tank? Well, the nozzles have been designed to prevent any hazards from happening, rest assured. They feature a breakaway device that will allow the hose to separate when taken out with enough force. Initially designed in the early 20th century to be worn exclusively by basketball players, sneakers soon became one of those fashion fundamentals, similar to jeans and leather jackets. If you take a closer look at them, you'll see they have two extra holes on the side, similar to the shoelace holes. They're manufactured as such not only to provide extra ventilation, but to allow people to get extra creative with their laces when wearing the shoes. Admit it, you've always thought that chopsticks are merged at the end for the sole purpose of keeping them together until you're ready to dig into your meal. That may or may not be the whole truth. Under a more detailed inspection, the wooden tools feature a square-shaped end. Chopsticks manufactured like this date back to an old Japanese traditional design, which can help with breaking the ends easily. The separated end can then be used as a resting block for the chopsticks to keep it more sanitized in hopes it can be used again, since they won't be touching the table or any other surface. Women's bikes have a special design which, surprisingly, has a historical and fashionable purpose. The lower frame is for the most part meant to make up for the generally shorter height of ladies, compared to that of the average gentleman. While that is the case for handlebars and saddles, the overall frame is lower for an additional purpose. Way back when women wore long skirts and dresses all day, every day they needed to make sure their outfits wouldn't get caught in the frame. That's how we came up with a lower framed bicycle, perfectly made for women and their needs at the time. The fact that toothpastes are multicolored is not just a nice perk to make dental hygiene more fun. There's a secret meaning related to each of the colors, which dates back to the 1970s. In those days, people grew more and more interested in their oral health care, and as such, they were looking for products which could do more than merely clean their teeth. One company was the pioneer in that regard, adding mouthwash to its toothpaste, meaning the blue strip. They later added on the red strip, meant to feature ingredients which helped with gum care. Speaking of toothpaste, check the cap next time you open a new tube. You may be in for a little surprise. There's a pointed cone shape inside the cap, so you can puncture the seal of the toothpaste without cutting yourself or ruining your manicure. Not to mention, it's more hygienic since you won't be able to transfer germs or other bacteria into the product itself.
If you look very closely at the face of Lady Liberty, you can clearly see that the famous statue was inspired by none other than 50s pop star Elvis Presley. Nah, I'm just messing with you. The Statue of Liberty was designed by Frederick August Bertolli 60 years before Elvis was even born. Hey, don't be cruel. People have different opinions about who really inspired the face of Lady Liberty. According to one theory, the model for her was the beautiful Isabella Boyer. Isabella was born in 1841 to a wealthy family in Paris. When she turned 22, she moved to New York to marry an American entrepreneur and became a socialite. Isabella eventually moved home to Paris, where she met the famous sculptor Bartholdi. She was 38 at that time and still a strikingly beautiful woman. It was around this time that she was rumored to have modeled for Bartholdi's designs of the Statue of Liberty. Now, many people believe that Bartholdi modeled the face of Lady Liberty after someone much closer to him, his own mother, Augusta Charlotte Bartholdi. She was the youngest of Charlotte's 4 children. She had a close relationship with his mother throughout his life, so it would make sense that he would want to dedicate one of his most famous works to her. Lady Liberty was created as a beacon of hope and strength for immigrants arriving to the new land. To Bartholdi, his own mother also represented these things. Charlotte raised her children as a single mother and encouraged them to pursue their dreams. There's another theory that suggests that Lady Liberty might not be modeled after a Western white woman like previously thought. As a young man, Bartholdi went on a trip to Egypt, and after seeing the pyramids, he was inspired to create colossal sculptures. Older and more successful, Bartholdi returned to Egypt to propose a new sculpture at the entrance of the Suez Canal. The sculpture was to be called Egypt Carrying the Light to Asia, and depicted a cloaked figure holding a torch to guide travelers through the canal. Sound familiar yet? In Bartholdi's original sketch, the face of the cloaked figure was modeled after an Egyptian peasant. Eventually, the money ran dry, and the sculpture wasn't commissioned after all. Bartholdi later recycled the design of the sculpture, changing the image of a young peasant to a Western-looking woman, creating the iconic statue that we know today. Another theory suggests that Lady Liberty might not even be a lady at all. Author and Statue of Liberty scholar Elizabeth Mitchell believes that Bartholdi did model Lady Liberty's face after a family member, but not his mother. Upon studying the statue's face, Elizabeth noted that Charlotte Bartholdi had a slightly different face structure than Lady Liberty. In the early years of his career, Bartholdi was a bust maker, known for his accuracy, so these slight discrepancies didn't make sense. When Elizabeth came across pictures of Bartholdi's brother, Jean-Charles, she noticed that his face bore a striking resemblance to Lady Liberty. It's a popular myth that the Statue of Liberty was a gift to the United States from France. But in fact, the statue was completely crowdfunded by activist Edouard de Labarre. He was a huge supporter of Bartholdi's work and encouraged the French people to raise money for the statue. Meanwhile, the American public crowdfunded the money to pay for the pedestal. Bartholdi completed the iconic torch-bearing arm of Lady Liberty years before finishing the rest of the design. The arm was then displayed in Madison Square Garden to encourage the public to donate to the statue. Fundraising from the American public proved to be difficult, until publisher Joseph Pulitzer stepped in. He started a drive for donations and promised that each contributor would receive an honorary shout-out in his famous newspaper, The New York World. This attracted over 120,000 donations and raised enough funds to complete the statue. The statue and pedestal together cost $500,000 to build. In today's money, that would be over $10 million. The statue was completed in France and then shipped to America, split into over 300 copper pieces, each packed in wooden boxes. Over 200,000 Americans waited to greet the ship, carrying Lady Liberty as it arrived in New York Harbor. The statue was assembled on Bedloe's Island, which is now known as Liberty Island. A mistake might have been made when the Statue of Liberty was assembled. During an inspection in 1982, workers realized that her head had been installed 2 feet off-center. Lady Liberty wasn't always the iconic green color that we know today. The statue originally consisted of copper skin over iron framework, making Lady Liberty appear a bright bronze color. Over the years, the copper began to oxidize, forming a protective layer called patina and creating a bright green hue. It took 30 years for Lady Liberty to turn fully green. And we all know it's not easy, being green. If Bartholdi had had his way, Lady Liberty would never have been green, or even copper for that matter. The architect originally intended for the statue to be a lighthouse. In order for the lighthouse to be visible at night, Bartholdi planned to wrap the entire sculpture in gold leaf so that it would glow under the moonlight. This idea was rejected because it would have been far too expensive. Speaking of the statue's size, Bartholdi was assisted in his designs of Lady Liberty's structure by Gustave Eiffel. He was a famous structural engineer who, you might have guessed from his name, is famous for designing the Eiffel Tower. Eiffel designed the framework and structures that support the Statue of Liberty. New York isn't the only city to have its own Lady Liberty. You can find a much smaller version of the sculpture within the entrance hall to this famous museum in Paris. This mini Lady Liberty was crafted by Bartoli shortly after the original statue was erected for the 1900 Paris Exposition, a world fair held in France to celebrate the achievements of the previous century. Shortly down the road in front of this famous Paris tunnel is the Flame of Liberty. This is a full-size replica of the flame from Lady Liberty's torch covered in gold leaf. This monument was gifted to France in 1989 from donors across the world as a thank you for the Statue of Liberty and as a symbol of the Franco-American friendship. About 4.5 million people visit the famous statue every year. By comparison, around 3.25 million people visit the London Eye each year. This makes the Statue of Liberty one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world. Visiting Lady Liberty is also a good workout. Visitors need to climb 354 steps to reach the crown. I've been there, it's really cool. Inside the crown, there are 25 windows, providing stunning panoramic views of New York City. It's also much smaller than you thought it would be. Lady Liberty's crown is adorned with 7 individual spikes. Some say these spikes represent the 7 oceans and continents of the world, bearing the universal concept of liberty. Others think they represent rays of sunshine. Almost 100 years after the statue was erected, Lady Liberty's torch was given an upgrade. In 1984, the statue's original copper torch was replaced with a new one covered in 24-karat gold leaf. The torch is the only place not accessible to visitors due to damage it previously sustained, making it unsafe for visitors. Now, I've tried this one myself too. Pinch your elbow as hard as you can. You barely feel pain. How come? Well, different areas of your skin have different nerve endings. Our bodies are designed to be more sensitive to pain in places that are at higher risk of getting damaged. Those important parts have more nerve endings so that we're more alert and able to protect ourselves. And thick skin, like that on elbows, has fewer pain detectors. Now, I'm not talking about the tingling, jolting pain you can feel when you hit your elbow against something. Oh, that feels almost like your entire arm has been electrocuted. It's not a feeling I would consider funny, but it comes from the funny bone. Now, the funny bone isn't actually a bone. It's a nerve that starts in your spine, goes through your neck, through your elbow, and through your fingers. Its real name is the ulnar nerve. It's one of the 3 primary nerves in your arm, and it provides sensation to the fingertips. Your ulnar nerve is well protected by muscle, fat, and bone. But there's one spot at your elbow where this nerve is exposed, and that spot is, the funny bone. A different but real version of Achilles' story, huh? Okay, so now you know why it hits so different when you bump your funny bone and why you feel nothing when you pinch your elbow. Now, the next phenomenon is related to socially awkward moments. Okay, maybe not entirely. It might happen when your crush gives you a compliment. I'm talking about blushing. Now, I'm not sure those butterflies in your stomach exist when you're in love. But I'm sure of this, when you blush, your stomach lining also turns red. Yeah, I've looked. The stomach lining is the tissue that protects your stomach walls from the acid inside. When you blush, it also turns red because blushing happens when the blood rises to the surface of the skin. This affects the stomach too. Now, this is a natural process, a physiological response to the change in your emotions. Now, since we're talking about the stomach, it might be a good time to mention that the stomach fluid has the ability to melt a steel table. Yup. This means the acid would be able to digest your internal organs. Luckily, the stomach lining prevents this from happening. Number 3 is about letting you know that you can glow in the dark. Now, don't turn off the lights just yet. You can't see it with the unaided eye. These visuals of glittering human bodies come from ultra-sensitive cameras. Japanese scientists were the first to capture the images of human bioluminescence. Only ultra-sensitive cameras can reveal that our bodies emit tiny amounts of light, because this light is 1,000 times weaker than the human eye can detect. Apparently, all living creatures produce a small amount of light thanks to the chemical reactions in their cells. Humans are newly added to this list. The researchers had been photographing the upper bodies of the volunteers for several days. The results showed that the amount of emitted light followed a 24-hour cycle. The glow is at its highest in late afternoon and lowest late at night. Plus, the brightest light is emitted from the cheeks, forehead, and neck. Interestingly, this does not correspond with the brightest areas caught by thermal cameras. Did you know you're a little bit taller in the morning than you are later at night? Yes, I've been measuring you. Seriously, this height difference is related to gravity. Its force compresses the cartilage in your spine and knees when you stand up or sit down throughout the day. But when you're lying down, your spine decompresses and relaxes. That's why when you wake up in the morning after resting in bed all night, you're taller. The increase in height is not even above an inch, so don't bet on who is taller after hearing this information. Fun fact, astronauts returning from a mission are a few inches taller than they usually are on Earth. It's because of the lack of gravity on the International Space Station. They don't remain that tall forever, though. When they're on the Earth again, gravity gradually squeezes them back down to their usual height. Now, let's get back to the organ we've already spoken about, the skin. Yes, the skin is an organ. In fact, it's the largest organ in your body. It contributes to about 15% of your body weight. What else does this organ do besides covering your body? It performs vital functions. For instance, it protects your body from external physical and biological harm. Plus, it prevents excessive water loss. Now, I can't help wondering what other surprises the human body has in store for us. But right now, let's move on to the animal planet. Owls don't have eyeballs. Instead, they have something called eye tubes. Their rod-shaped eyes do not move in their sockets as our eyeballs do. That's why owls would have to move their entire bodies to look around. But moving their torsos would make some noise, and other animals would hear it. So owls have evolved to have necks that can twist to around 270 degrees, and they move super silently. But why the concern? Well, night vision requires large corneas to get as much light as possible. This is the main reason why most nocturnal animals, such as the slow loris or tarsier, have big eyes. For owls, it works a little differently. Since they have small heads, such large eyes wouldn't be able to fit inside. Now, even though these creatures don't have eyeballs, they have 3 sets of eyelids. One set is for blinking, one is for sleeping, and the last one is for keeping their eye tubes clean. So, do the owls give a hoot about that? Yes, they do. Moving on from nocturnal animals to the ones you're more familiar with. Meow. Cats have an extra organ that allows them to taste scents in the air. This organ is called Jacobson's organ, or the vomeral nasal organ. Jacobson's organ is located inside the cat's nasal cavity and opens into the roof of the mouth. This organ can detect specific chemicals by using nerves that lead directly to the brain. That's not a regular sniffing, though. The odor receptors of Jacobson's organ aren't designed to catch ordinary smells. They detect chemicals that have no odor at all. In other words, cats can detect undetectable smells. It's not just this. Jacobson's organ increases the sense of smell. For instance, when kittens need to find their mother's milk, imagine there are 2 mother cats and 4 kittens. Kittens can distinguish their mother from the other grown-up cat with the help of their sense of smell. Now, when 2 people meet, they assess each other's body language. Cats can usually do this by sniffing each other's heads. This greeting releases pheromones that can tell a lot about one cat to the other, like what the other feline likes to eat or if they are healthy or not. They can even evaluate whether the other cat is happy or moody, all thanks to Jacobson's organ. Now, another fact about cats. Their nose has distinct ridges that look like a pattern. Similar to our fingerprints, every cat has a unique nose print. It can be used as a form of identification. Okay, cat, we can nail you for breaking the vase. We have your nose prints all over it. Now, do you want to cut a deal? Just tell us what you know about the dog and that chewed-up DVD.
You open a bag of chips and find it half empty, or half full if you're an optimist. Frustrating, I know, but I figured it's not because the manufacturer wants to get more cash out of you. The extra air helps to protect your chips from any damage. If the bags were filled to the brim, you'd get chip dust instead of chips after their transportation. A raspberry-flavored ice pop is typically blue, not pink or red, which both would be more obvious color choices. Well, imagine you're making a pack of popsicles. You can pick green for apple flavor, pineapple or lemon is yellow. There's strawberry, so it should be red. Cherry, well, red again. Watermelon? Red. And now raspberry. Yeah, red. But 4 reds are definitely way too many, and people won't tell the difference between them easily. So, at first, both strawberry and cherry flavors were red, but of different shades. The watermelon one was pink. They made the raspberry ones of a deep dark red dye. Then, scientists proved that that dye might be dangerous, so it was banned. Blue was another free color option, but there's no blue fruit or berry except for blueberry. And it's not a very popular flavor, so manufacturers started to paint raspberry blue. Sometimes they call it blue raspberry, but it's just a lab thing that doesn't naturally exist. If you buy a clock or see a picture of it, it'll most likely show 10:10 by default. The only reason behind it is that it just looks nice. You can see both hands, and they don't overlap. Also, it's symmetrical and nice, and it frames the 12. And finally, it makes a smiling shape that gives off a positive vibe. Mattresses usually have those decorative stitching patterns on them. Mattress manufacturers make a limited number of different mattresses, and the only way to make them look different is to come up with a fancy stitching pattern. 2 mattresses of different companies might be the exact same quality, but cost differently. Most people will never know it and will decide that different patterns mean something in terms of quality. So, when shopping, don't mind the pattern at all. Cheese has holes. In most types, they're small, but they can also be huge. Cheese is made by adding bacteria to milk, and the holes are the result of it. Those bacteria consume lactic acid and release little gas bubbles. They're trapped in the cheese, and then they pop, forming those little holes. The size of holes depends on the production temperature and its acidity. Swiss cheese has extra large holes. It's made at a temperature of around 120 degrees Fahrenheit and incubated at 70 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 7 days. So the cheese is very soft and the bubbles grow especially big. All coins have ridges, but have you ever wondered why? At first, all coins were linked to a silver standard. The amount of silver used in a coin was proportionate to the value of the coin. So, a $1 coin had way more actual silver in it than, say, a quarter. The edges were made reeded for security reasons. Once, it was a coin element that made a coin harder to reciprocate. It also prevented another kind of fraud. People would shave off a bit of metal from the edges of coins. It would be just a little so that no one would notice the difference. But if you did it to many coins, you'd get enough precious metals to sell. Reeded edges made it impossible. If someone tried to shave them off, the ridge would become smooth, and it'd be obvious to anyone that a coin had been tampered with. Nickels and pennies didn't have them because they were made of inexpensive metals, so there was no sense in protecting them. Now, no one makes coins out of silver, but the ridges are still there. When the governments started to produce new coins, they didn't see a point in changing the coin-making equipment, and they just kept the reeded edges. If you ever played billiards, you must know that green table well. The game originated around the 14th century, 5 centuries before basketball. Back then, folks didn't have pool tables, of course. Instead, they were playing it outside on the green lawn. Later, people moved the game indoors so they could play it even when it was raining. And they kept the nostalgic green to give it some lawn vibes. Medical workers usually wear a uniform that is a shade of blue or green. There's a reason for it. Before the 20th century, they were wearing their regular clothes, even when performing surgery. With the development of medicine, people started to pay more attention to matters of sterileness, so they started to wear a uniform, and at first, it was white to signify purity. The problem was that some stains were very hard to wash off from the white uniform. The color white would become greenish. So, it made sense to make the uniform green or blue. Besides, surgeons mostly focus on red colors during work. Blue and green are exactly the opposite side of the spectrum. So, if everything else is greenish-blue, the red becomes even more distinctive. Wash your hands with plain white soap, and you'll see some white foam. Wash them with a blue, red, yellow, green, whatever color, and the foam is still white. The reason for it is scattered light. Any light rays that falls on an object either get absorbed or are reflected back. Things that absorb all colors appear black. Those that reflect all colors are white. A red bar of soap is red because only the red color reflects back, and the other colors are absorbed. But once you produce some foam, it's made of many little bubbles. Each of them scatters light in different directions, so it looks white. Do you see something when you rub your eyes? These colors and shapes are called phosphenes. The reason why you see them is that when you're rubbing, you increase the pressure in the eyeball and activate the neurons of the retina that process visual information. Once they're activated, your brain interprets it as if you see the light, and it tries to actually see it. Ever wondered why you have black circles around your eyes when you're tired? The skin under the eyes is very thin, so the blood vessels are very close to the surface, and you can see any difference easily. When you lack sleep, your skin gets paler, and the blood vessels are even more visible. So, you can see those dark circles showing through the skin. Also, with age, your skin naturally gets thinner, so that's why older people tend to have dark circles. But if you're young, try to get more sleep, and they'll be gone. You say Germany, the Spanish say Alemania, and the Germans say Deutschland, and it sounds like 3 different countries, but it's just one. If someone's name is Olivia, she will be more or less of Olivia everywhere. So why do countries have different names in different languages? Countries have existed for a long time. Back when people from different countries couldn't communicate and spoke different languages, they'd refer to some territory the way they referred to it, never agreeing with other countries, and the name stuck. A German tribe called Alemanni once lived in what's now Switzerland. So I guess that's why the Spanish started to call the land Alemania. Then the Germans were united and called themselves Deutschland. In English, the pronoun I is always capitalized. Even the linguists don't know for sure why it's so. At least yet. I comes from the German ich. During the time it evolved from ish to ich and later to I. Some theorize that a little I appeared to be too insignificant in a sentence, standing on its own, so it started to be capitalized to be more distinctive. If you've ever seen a behind-the-scenes video, you might have noticed that they click that clapperboard before each scene. This clap helps a lot at the stage of editing. The film and the audio are recorded separately, and when they're synchronized, the clapperboard makes that brief clap at the very beginning of a shot scene. And it's easier to find where the scene starts to add the audio. Another reason is to give more details on the filmed piece. They add information about the scene and take number, the filming date, the camera angle, and other important stuff to the clapperboard that makes it easier to go through hundreds of video pieces later. The button on the top of your baseball cap is there purely for aesthetic purposes. By the way, this little thing has a name. Professionals call it a squacho. Its initial function was to hold the 4 panels of the cap together. As hat making improved, the panels stopped needing it to hold together, and squacho was removed. But hats didn't look the same without it. Soon after, the squacho returned due to popular demand. Originally, high-heeled shoes weren't intended for galas and proms. Back in the 10th century, horse riding was pretty tough with flat-soled shoes, and many riders' feet would constantly fall out of the stirrups. Higher heels helped deal with that problem. The grip was much firmer with them, and they grew in popularity. It wasn't long before they became a fashion accessory to match stylish outfits. Notable people wouldn't want to be seen without them. Riding a horse with fancy heels was the equivalent of owning a luxurious sports car. Even though heels were worn mainly by men at the start, ladies picked up on the iconic trend in the 17th century. It's been one of the biggest ever since. In ancient Rome, salt was so precious that people even called it white gold. With scorching heat and no fridges, its purpose was to preserve food, mainly meat and fish. As a bonus, it made everything tastier. Sal, which is salt in Latin, was used instead of money to pay salaries. Here is where the word salary originated. Rice is the oldest cultivated food in human history. Its origins as wild grass started in a small valley around 15,000 years ago in Southeast Asia. Today, it's served globally as a staple diet and popular ingredient to 3.5 billion people. It would be difficult to imagine a world without video calls you use through your phone camera or laptop. The technology has helped game-changing innovations like working from home. Still, video calls' original purpose is far from how we use them today. The technology was introduced to confirm if the coffee was still in a pot. In 1993, researchers at the University of Cambridge found it frustrating when they took a break to get a cup of coffee, only to find that the pot was empty. So, they invented a device to monitor it and hooked up a camera that provided their computer with a live stream of the coffee pot. Thanks to these researchers, we can work in pajamas now. We know Albert Einstein for various achievements, but there's something he co-invented that goes overlooked. Together with his student, he invented a modified refrigerator. It's not like the ones we use today. In the 1920s, fridges weren't quite as safe as they produced poisonous gases. He wanted to create a safer version that didn't require electricity without moving